This is Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. It's powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To start your free 14-day trial, visit shopify.com. Hey entrepreneurs, my name is Felix and I'm the host of the Shopify Masters podcast. Each week we put out podcast interviews with successful e-commerce entrepreneurs or experts to give you inspiration, motivation, and actionable tips to increase your traffic and sales so your store can generate the sales you need to live the life you want. In the last episode, May Pak from TinyHandsOnline.com revealed how she studies her customers using Facebook. On today's episode, you'll learn from an entrepreneur that's built a $3 million business working just 4 hours a day. In this episode, you'll learn why you should drive your non-English speaking customers to Amazon, why they redo their website from scratch every single year, why you should buy Facebook ads in Europe rather than in the US. Today I'm joined by Pat LaHoo from BottleCutting.com. Bottle Cutting is a do-it-yourself glassware company. It was started in 2012 and based out of Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Patrick.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So tell us a little bit more about your store and what are the most popular products that you sell?
So BottleCutting.com, we've basically, every product we sell is all in that same space, which is bottle cutting. But the main product we sell is the Kinkajou bottle cutter, which I invented back in 2012.
Very cool. So tell the audience a little more about what is bottle cutting? Like, what is the purpose of cutting bottles?
So bottle cutting is nothing new. It's been around, it was pretty big in the 70s. It kind of died out, and it's kind of making a comeback now. I think it's more popular now than maybe it was in the 70s because the bottles these days are a lot nicer. And there's also, while we recycle things, upcycling seems to be the new recycling. So instead of recycling something, we use it for something else. And I think the third thing that's kind of pushing it forward is I don't think there's ever been a time in history when people love their brands as much as they do now. So if you're into Heineken, you might want Heineken glasses, or if you're into some craft brewery that's down the street, that makes great bottles, you might want to reuse them for something else.
Very cool. So how did you know that this was a growing market or a market where you felt comfortable starting a business? You said that this was popular, in the 70s. And did you recognize the trend coming back? What did you see about the marketplace that made you want to get into this business?
So my story is probably a little backwards. It really wasn't a plan that started out, I'm going to get into the bottle cutting space. How it actually all started was I've always been somewhat of an entrepreneur, and I had just left a venture. It was on a Friday, and during that weekend, this was 3 years ago, I had just discovered Kickstarter. Back then, it was kind of just blooming. The Pebble watch had just been funded. Mm-hmm. It was kind of on all the blogs, and I was just really excited about this new platform. And by Monday, a couple of days after discovering, I decided that's it. I'm a big junkie for new experiences, and I wanted to do a Kickstarter, but I really had no idea what I was going to do. I spent that day kind of, surfing the internet, trying to come up with ideas. I came up with a few. 2 of them would have required months and months of R&D and were pretty complicated. And the third was an idea for a bottle cutter. I had seen a YouTube video about someone cutting a bottle with a piece of string and acetone and lighting it on fire. And I thought, okay, that's pretty cool, but, we could probably do better than that. And it was kind of a roller coaster. When I get passionate about something, I'm like a dog. I just don't let it go. And 20 days later, after coming up with the idea, I was on Kickstarter. I had, applied for a patent, come up with a prototype, filmed a video. It was kind of a really quick process. I threw it up on Kickstarter. And 30 days later, I had raised $80,000 for the Kinkajou bottle cutter.
No, very cool. Yeah, and I would definitely want to get into the Kickstarter experience in a second. So you came up with a bunch of ideas, or at least a few ideas, and then it sounded like you had a list of criteria that you wanted to follow, either maybe on paper or in your head, to narrow it down to bottle cutting. So can you talk to us a little about the criteria that you were working with and how you came up with them?
So for me, when I did the Kickstarter, it really wasn't. I wasn't focused on starting a business. I was more focused on just having a Kickstarter experience. I thought it was a really cool platform. It's something I want to participate in. So my criteria was more about how fast can I do a Kickstarter? And my other ideas literally had software involved, hardware, and it would have just taken a long time. Whereas the bottle cutter, like I said, from the day I had the idea to the day I was on Kickstarter with my pitch video was only 20 days. So that was the main criteria: is how fast can I get on there?
Very cool. Yeah, 20 days is definitely fast, and I definitely want to hear more about what you did in those 20 days. So before we get there, though, you said it sounded like you have a pretty rich history of entrepreneurial ventures. You had just left one before you started the bottle cutting Kickstarter campaign. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience? Like, what other kind of projects or businesses have you worked with or launched in the past?
Sure. So I started down the entrepreneur path in my early 20s. I had been working in the computer industry, and while it was great, I kind of felt, it'd be great to try something on my own. And I ventured off into the back then ever-growing internet service provider industry, so the ISP industry. I started my first ISP. It went on for a couple of years, merged with a much larger ISP. We ran that for 5-6 years, and then eventually sold that to a much larger ISP. From there, I ended up actually going back to school. I did an MBA. I figured if I was going to be in business, I should maybe get a bit of education in it. And then from there, I hopped around a few companies. And the last venture I was involved in was a software company. We were developing apps at the time for Android, BlackBerry, and Apple. And while it was a growing market, it was a very competitive market, and I just felt it wasn't a good fit for me. So I got out of that, and then that's when I kind of stumbled on Kickstarter.
Yeah, so you had a computer industry experience, online experience, software. So these are all, pretty, I wouldn't say they're not tangible, but, when you're moving into a physical kind of product space, was that a hard transition for you? Like, what kind of things that you have to, I guess, learn for the first time when you made that transition into selling physical products?
Yeah, so it was a pretty steep learning curve. I was pretty naive about the whole thing, building products. I was thinking, okay, well, I'll get a mold made here or in the U.S. I'll order third-party parts. I'll assemble this stuff in my garage and just ship out of my house. And very small thinking, and that was my plan. But while I was on Kickstarter, I was fortunate to have the timing of it all. When I was on there, several manufacturers from China reached out. And the first one, spoke no English at all, so that wasn't going to work. The second one spoke some English, but really didn't understand it. It was kind of, there was obviously a communication issue. And then the third person who reached out actually was American, who had been doing business in China for over a decade at the time. So communication wasn't an issue, and he basically gave me a quick lesson on the things I was doing, and I was crazy to try and build this stuff, even in North America with the prices, or having, the mindset that I needed to touch every piece and ship it out myself. So he kind of put me in the right direction really early on, which really saved everything, because I would have probably crumbled on the amount of work I would have had to do if I physically had to touch every one of these things that I sold.
Yeah, no. So during that time where you were thinking about launching a Kickstarter campaign and you came up with this idea, did this kind of product exist before, or was this a completely, totally different, I guess, a brand new invention?
So there were other bottle cutters on the market. It was it was kind of a space. These bottle cutters that were still around were the original ones from the 70s. And I felt like there was really no branding to them. They weren't doing any sort of marketing that I could see. Most of them didn't even have websites. So it was a pretty non-competitive space, which kind of gave me an edge. I came out with a brand, a cool name, a device that was very different than what was actually around in the 70s. And it allowed me, I think, to grab a pretty significant market share of that industry.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think, when someone's out there thinking about what kind of product, what kind of business to start, do you think this is I wouldn't say scalable, but like a repeatable process where you look for industries that have an existing product already, but there's like no clear leader that's branding or marketing well, and then coming in and taking over that space? Is that like a pretty repeatable process?
So I think it is, but the trick is obviously stumbling upon these industries. I stumbled upon this by accident. I think actively going out and trying to find these industries might be tough, because bottle cutting is a pretty niche thing. if I was actively looking for something like that, would I have stumbled upon that? Probably not. But I'm a big believer in, don't compete if you don't have to. It's, competition's great and all, but it's also tough on business. If you can find a space that's, kind of where no one's playing, it's a great place to start.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter campaign. So you've launched two, but we'll start with the first one, which was the Kinkajou bottle cutter with a goal of $75,000, ended up raising $81,000 from 1,087 backers. So did it come down to the wire? Because, most Kickstarter campaigns, you raise a good amount of money, but it just barely crossed that goal line. Did it come down to the wire at the end of the day?
Yeah, it did. So back then, Kickstarter was very new and very few people knew about it compared to now these days. And like I said, when I launched this, I was pretty naive about the whole thing. I put it on there, and literally in the first few weeks, I got no pledges. And I was like, okay, well, how does this work? I spent a lot of time contacting blogs and just generating traffic. And I remember there was days I would contact 20, 30 blogs with, not cookie cutter emails, but all personal emails. And maybe every day one of them would pick it up. But every time one would pick it up, it would generate, another $3,000, $4,000 in pledges. So it definitely took the 30 days to get to the finish line.
Yeah, that's one of the issues I've heard from other Kickstarter campaign creators is that early traction is the hardest, where when you don't have any sales early on, nobody really wants to pay attention to you because they think that it's not going to be a worthwhile product, or it might not come to market because there's not that early traction. So I think your approach made a lot of sense. Start reaching out to these publications and getting some eyeballs onto the project itself. And you said that you really personalized with those emails rather than
because these blogs get inundated. I figure these copy paste emails aren't just going to work. So I took the time, but it's a very different space now. I feel like back then the blogs might have been getting emails, but they must be getting inundated now.
Yeah.
It's just, the scale of the amount of projects live on Kickstarter is 10 times or even maybe 100 times what it was. And Kickstarter since then has opened up in all sorts of countries. So it's a whole different beast when it comes to, getting your word out there for your Kickstarter.
Right. So what's the process that you follow when you want to personalize emails and not make it not necessarily a chore, but like it's really hard to do so many right in a given day. So do you have a process when you sit down and? So
I would really focus on blogs I felt where my product would fit. I'm a big fan of a lot of blogs, and I felt like it'd be great to get on those blogs, but it really doesn't fit. So I focused on a lot of the ones that it fit, and then a lot of times I would find an independent writer for that, who might write for that blog and reach out to them directly. And I would say it was easier back then because I think these blogs, Kickstarter was new, it was exciting. A lot of blogs, if they hadn't covered Kickstarter before, it was a good opportunity for them to start.
Cool. So you went on these, found a bunch of blogs that you thought your product would fit on, and then you looked for the individual authors or contributors onto that blog. And then did you find their email address or Twitter? Like how did you reach out to them? What did you say to them?
Email, Twitter, some on LinkedIn. Just kind of used every resource I had. Mm-hmm. And
And how did you personalize it? Like, what were you saying to make sure that they knew that it was personalized?
So, if it was a writer, I would say, I would reference one of their previous articles, things like that. So at least there would be an opening line that made sense and it wasn't cookie cutter. They could tell this person actually knows who I am or things like that.
Yeah, even it's funny, like you're saying how people get inundated with emails today. Like even personalization has become so frequently used that you start to notice. Like 3 years ago, I think that definitely worked. Even today, you start recognizing people, at least for me, even I start recognizing when people take that approach of mentioning an article or mentioning, in my example, a podcast episode that they had heard previously. So I think it's a format that definitely makes sense. And I think the more personalized you can make it, the better. Even today, you try even harder to make it even more personalized. So yeah, I want to talk about the first 20 days, the 20 days that you spent before launching a Kickstarter. So what did you do during that time? Because you had to come up with the product, you had to create all the marketing material for the video, the copy on the Kickstarter campaign. How did you spend your time?
So it was crazy. It took me 5-6 days to mull through multiple prototypes. once I felt I had a good idea, I literally built one out of Lego wheels. That's kind of how it started. And then I needed to get something a little bit more substantial for the video, for the pitch video. So I learned. I had no idea how to use CAD, but within a day I was able to get enough CAD skills to pull out a decent 3D model. I sent it to a 3D printer. 3 days later, I had it FedEx to my door. Stuck my Lego wheels in it. I must have cut 300 bottles. Finished those bottles, sanded them, and then started working on a pitch video. And then during that whole time, I was trying to work out, like, what's this thing actually going to cost, because I needed to get a realistic number to ask. So the reason I asked for 75 grand, which is quite a bit of money, is, I had no intention of going to China. 20 days is not, I had never dealt with China. The whole thing felt really daunting. So I was just going to deal with someone in the US, and that's kind of where the price point was. And then, I filmed the pitch video. I got a hold of a patent lawyer, made sure that I was protected, and just kind of launched it.
Yeah, and I think nowadays Kickstarter is even more strict with making sure that the creator has everything figured out, beforehand. And I think you were saying that you hadn't nailed down the manufacturing yet by the time that you launched. Like, was that something you worried about, like not being ready if the campaign did succeed? Like, what do you do next?
So back then, there really wasn't this sentiment that projects failed because it was fairly new. But these days, there's obviously a sentiment that not all projects succeed. So the whole notion of putting all your ducks in a row, while it was important, really wasn't a big focus of Kickstarter. They didn't really have this. They didn't focus so much on due diligence at the time, because for the majority of the projects back then, I think they did work. But for me, I again, because I was naive, I think I had given maybe 3 months to as a completion date. But I missed it by, I think it took me additional almost 2.5, maybe even 3 months after that. So I overshot my deadline by 3 months, simply because the whole thing, I underestimated, and I think a lot of people do, underestimate what it actually takes to build a product, especially overseas.
Makes sense. So the campaign ended. You had $81,000 ready to go from over 1,000 backers. What did you hit the ground running do? Like, what did you do next?
So the funny thing is, I had raised this money, and again, I still wasn't in a position where I was thinking I was going to start a business with this. This was more about, I'm going to fulfill these orders, and I'm just going to go get another job, and I did. I was working almost part-time on this, fulfilling these orders, because I went and got another job, and I worked at that job for almost 4 months. But during the time that I was at this new position, I kept getting emails every day from people saying things like, "Hey, I saw your Kickstarter, but I missed it. I wonder if I could pre-order it." And I was being inundated with them. So I said, okay, well, I'll take pre-orders for sure. I'll make a little bit of extra money. So I opened up a Shopify store, nothing too fancy, just put it up there. And in the time my Kickstarter ended to the time I actually shipped, I took another $250,000 worth of pre-orders. So now I had raised over 300 grand, and really no one had physically touched this thing yet. So I thought, okay, well, obviously there is a business here. So I quit that other job and went full-time on bottle cutting.
Wow. $250,000 after just raising 81,000. That's crazy. How long what was that period of time that you raised?
5 months. And the crazy thing is, like, I did zero advertising to try. So when you're doing a Kickstarter, they give you stats in the background of how many people viewed your video and kind of all sorts of, analytics. And I remember when I ended my Kickstarter, I think my video views were at maybe 40,000 for the entire campaign. But by the time I actually sold my first Kinkajou, my video views on my Kickstarter were upwards of 130,000.
Wow.
So there was obviously, and it was just kind of a sweet time for Kickstarter, because it was so new that people would spend time inside Kickstarter seeing what else people had done, and it kept, So I think they were more likely to look for other projects that may have missed their chance, but still wanted to get in on them.
So a lot of your sales are just like straight up driven from your Kickstarter page, even though the campaign had already ended.
Yeah, and I was frustrating too because I back then, and I think it's still like this. Kickstarter locks your page at the end of the campaign. You can't go back and make changes. And I had this intention of changing the main screen to saying things like, "Hey, if you missed my Kickstarter, you can reach me here." Just an easy way for people to reach me. But I didn't know that Kickstarter locked the page. So my campaign ended, and I came to put up this new slide, and the page was locked on me, and it was pretty frustrating because I knew these video views were happening, and even the emails that I got, I feel like if I had some type of messaging on there, I would have actually probably raised a lot more.
Yeah. I think now they let you have that buy now or shop now button.
Yeah, now it's become much friendlier.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Sure.
I'm sure this makes a huge difference because you don't want people coming to a page and wanting to buy, but then not knowing where to go next.
Yeah, I can't find you.
Yeah,
exactly.
So the manufacturing. So once you got the funds, the $81,000, you found a English speaking or American out in China that you wanted to work with. How did you get all the manufacturing set up?
So working with him, he had engineers on staff, and he took my pretty crude CAD drawings and turned them into something that could actually be put through a manufacturing process. And he works, he's 12 hours time difference from me, so we would work at night via Skype, and every day we would kind of push the project forward. And by December of that year, we had products that were on their way and selling.
Awesome. So what was the supply chain like? They manufactured it. Did they ship it to you or logistics company?
Yeah. So my guy in China basically said, "Look, if you're planning on touching every one of these things, you're going to drive yourself nuts. You can't do this. It's not scalable." So he talked me into going to find a logistics company in the U.S. So now, everything's manufactured in Asia. It's put onto containers, brought over by boat, and it's my logistics company is in Atlanta. So it's sometimes, depending which coast I land on, but basically makes its way to Atlanta, and it's somewhat automatic. While we're having this conversation, if I sell a product, I really have to do nothing. It just kind of happens.
Very cool. So after this Kinkachu bottle cutter, I think about a year later, you launched another Kickstarter campaign, this time setting your goal lower to $15,000, but ended up raising almost the same amount of money, $76,000 from 981 backers. So you returned back to Kickstarter. What was the reasoning behind that?
So it worked so great the first time. I thought, let's try it again, and it worked. But it's always easier to do a second or a third or a fourth Kickstarter, especially if you delivered on your first, because you can go back to your backers, and then if they had a good experience with you, they like the space, there's a good chance they're going to support the next Kickstarter.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So do you have the emails from the people that signed up or pre-ordered or backed the campaign the first time, and could you just email them?
Yeah, when you fill out, so when you finish a Kickstarter, you send out your customer survey, and that's when you capture everybody's email. And I don't think you know this, but I actually ended up doing a third Kickstarter, and it's not linked. You probably didn't see it on my account, but there's another account on Kickstarter where I did a third bottle cutting project.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's not linked. Tell us more about that.
It was a smaller one. It was more of a niche product. It was for converting bottles into pendant lights, and it was called the Firefly LED Pendant Light Kit, and that one raised $21,000.
Awesome. So, between the second campaign and the third campaign, were there things that you learned from that very first one, or maybe even the second one, that you knew you had to either do again for the subsequent campaigns, or you had to make sure that you did right for the subsequent campaigns?
So, one of the things, it's kind of, there's definitely this, for me, I feel it's a chicken and egg thing where when you're doing your Kickstarter, you want to present your best foot forward. So you want, it's great to present a prototype, but that prototype really needs to be almost done. Because I feel like you have so little, you get one shot at someone watching your video, and if they're not completely wowed, or, they'll just move on to the next video. But a lot of times it's hard to get that finished, polished product without the Kickstarter funds. So there's definitely, it's hard to do one without the other, but I do a lot of mentoring for Kickstarter projects. And I always tell people, like, don't launch until you're absolutely ready and always put your best foot forward.
Yeah, that's an important point that I want to talk about. You said that don't launch until you're absolutely ready, and then there's also, I guess, the other side of this, or the opposite of it, which is like you should be launching before you're ready. So I guess what do you think that you need to have in lined up that you definitely need to have ready before launching? What are some things that you can kind of figure out along the way?
Well, if it's a product, the product's got to be it's got to be 90% complete, I feel. Otherwise, because what's happened is Kickstarter's turned into this place where it's no longer, while there's still people in their garage tinkering, it's turned into this big money, big engineering firms, big companies like Pebble, putting out high-end finished products. So if you're going to compete against them and you've got something with duct tape on it, it's a little tough sell.
Makes sense. So the market is a lot more competitive because there's a lot more established and successful businesses coming in.
There are people out there that have done dozens of Kickstarters, and they've upped their game every single time. And now these products, while maybe they're not quite Apple products, but they're starting to look like them.
Makes sense. So what about promotion? Because I know the first time you did it, you launched the very first campaign you launched, and nothing happened. For the first couple weeks. The second and third campaigns, did you approach it differently when it comes to promotion?
No, I did the exact same thing, but I noticed that by the third campaign, I think we got one blog pickup. I felt it was just so saturated. So the only thing our biggest asset was not only people who had contributed to our previous Kickstarter campaigns, but also every product we've ever sold, we have lists of those people. So once you're established and you have a mailing list, it's just a little easier to get going.
So do you find now if you were to launch on Kickstarter that you have to bring your own customers and audience, and you can't really rely on pitching to PR?
So I think it's obviously the easier route to bring your own audience. Otherwise, I feel like every time you see a Kickstarter that's raised $1 million and it just looks like it happened overnight, I feel that there's a good chance that they've probably spent 100 or 200 grand in marketing. Facebook and all these different mediums now. It's such a competitive space that it'd be hard to believe that you were able to do something like that without that back engine pushing it.
Makes sense. So I want to talk about your marketing now, because I know that Kickstarter was definitely a big driver for you, the traffic that came from there. But outside of Kickstarter, what other ways have you found that works well for you to market and drive traffic to your bottlecutting.com?
So our main place we market is Facebook. We've been doing it for about 3 years now, and we spent significant funds in Facebook over the last 3 years. And while I feel like it still works, it didn't work as a good 3 years ago. It was a gold mine. Every dollar you'd put into Facebook, you'd get $10 back. But it's also become very competitive in Facebook too now. So Facebook ads, the prices have gone way up, and it's still it's tougher go, but it still works for us. So that's basically still our main focus.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your strategy for Facebook ads. So how do you, what is the campaign setup like? What kind of ads are you running? Like, how do you figure out what should go in the ad itself?
So we're always testing. One of the things that we try to do is we always try and touch base with our audience, a few times a week. So we have ongoing things like, bottle of the week, where we highlight a new bottle that we've cut and finished. We'll push that out through Instagram and Twitter, but mainly through Facebook. We do candle of the week because now we're selling candles, candle making kits. And we're also big on, always adding new products to our lineup. So we always launch 2 to 3 new products a year. And so those always give us new traction with customers. And when we do, every year I feel like we're upping our game. The website, we redo our website every single year from scratch, and we're always doing new videos. And every time we do it, we get a bit better at it. It gets a little bit more professional. So we're doing that. And then for Facebook ads, we've tried them all. We run whatever works, and when it no longer works, we kind of readjust and try something new.
So this bottle and can of the week approach, I think this is going to be interesting because I think other store owners out there can probably do something similar. So you are featuring one of your products, and then you're just running ads with that product's photos. Like, how are you promoting that bottle of the week?
Yeah. So for our space, while people might like the bottle cutter, it's not really what they're interested in. They're interested in the finished products. So we take the time. We grab bottles from all over the world. We cut them, we finish them, and we feature them every week. So if you were to go to our Instagram page, you would see like hundreds of bottles that we've cut and finished.
And these bottles are obviously not for sale, right? These are just the end results
Yeah,
of
so
using your
we've never sold a piece of glass. That's not our business. Our business is selling the tools to create these things.
Mm-hmm. So is it just you posting the content like organically, or are you boosting? How do you actually spend money on Facebook to drive traffic?
So we do. We used to do a lot of boosting of posts, but we feel it's only great when we'll do it at Christmas, or we'll do it. Father's Day is a big time for us, so maybe we'll boost posts around then. But we just got ads running every single day, and I think right now our current spend is I think it's about $1,500 a day US in Facebook. And that'll fluctuate. That's kind of like our low point. This is a slow time of year for us. Once we get closer to Christmas, we'll round that up. I think the most we've ever spent in one day was $12,000.
Wow! So that's amazing. So you don't have to go into specific details, but how do you figure out how to target those ads?
So targeting, it's always a challenge. I think we're doing what everybody does. You take your customer list, you upload it to Facebook. They create lookalike audiences, and then you target those. And but the more you do this, and once you start spending the amount of money we've spent, it becomes tougher and tougher because you do run out of audiences. In the beginning, the audiences, you might think an audience of 30 million is great, and you'll be targeting them for a long time. But once you start spending a couple grand a day, you might hit 300,000-400,000 of those every day. So it doesn't take long to burn through that 30 million. Part of our other strategy too is while we have our store, we've also jumped on Amazon.com, and this year we've jumped on all the Amazons in Europe. What I'm finding is doing Facebook advertising in other countries other than Canada and the US, because it's not as saturated as it is here, the price points are a lot better out there, and I see more effectiveness in those countries, more reminiscent of what I used to see 3 years ago in the U.S.
Very cool. So if you are targeting non-U.S. countries, is there a different strategy that you have to take when you are, marketing to Europe?
So we don't. Right now, we're marketing to the UK. Is kind of our big marketing push in Europe. So right now it's pretty simple. Everything's in English still. Italy and France are our next targets, and we haven't quite decided yet if we're going to translate that because our site currently isn't in French. It's all in English. I mean, it's not in these other languages. Only in English. The other thing that's kind of a little bit different because we've had sales on bottlecutting.com from Europe. But it's kind of difficult for a customer to, spend $50 on a product and then have to pay another $40 in shipping to send it to the UK. And then it gets there and there's a 20% VAT, and it's kind of a hard sell. So when we do Facebook ads in Europe, we direct them directly to our Amazon page, which is not ideal because we have no way of really tracking how effective each ad is other than we see an increase in sales.
And Amazon will take care of the translation?
So Amazon recently changed things in Europe where it used to be you had to deal with every site. You would have to open up, if you wanted to do Amazon FBA, you had to ship product to Spain, to Germany, to Italy, to France, to the UK. But no one was doing it because it was too difficult. So now if you send all your products to Amazon UK, you can connect all the other Amazons. Now, your ads, your Amazon page will still be in English, but I feel like these countries are used to seeing that when shopping on Amazon.
Yeah, that's true because all the buttons and layouts are all the same anyway. It's pretty easy to know how to purchase. That's a really great point. So getting on Amazon, what was that process like? How did you? I think it's a marketplace that a lot of store owners out there are thinking about expanding into. Like, what are some of the pros and cons of being on Amazon?
I feel like Amazon is a necessary evil. Unfortunately, it's such a big space; it can't be avoided. But it's also not an easy space to deal with. The fees are fairly high. But to give you an example, we weren't on Amazon for the first year and a half, and then we decided, okay, you know what, we're going to jump on Amazon.com. And then within a few months, we were selling $50,000 a month on Amazon. And we really didn't do much. It was what we started noticing was when we do Facebook ads and we drive traffic to bottlecutting.com, there's definitely, while we can't measure it, there's definitely people out there who feel more comfortable buying from Amazon. It might be something they do every other day and it's a no-brainer for them. So every time we boost ads or we spend more on Facebook, our Amazon sales go up. So while we get sales on our own site, Amazon also benefits as well.
Wow, that's a great point, and that's amazing how much of a difference it made just from being on there. So what was the process like? If someone out there wants to get on Amazon today, like what's involved?
So there's two models for Amazon. One is the FBA model where you send your inventory to Amazon. In that model there, while there's still some headaches, Amazon does all the work. They ship it for you, everything. You really have to do nothing. The second one is where you fulfill your own orders. And luckily, the fulfillment house that I used in the US was already integrated into Amazon. So it was kind of, it was easy. We had to flick a few switches. But what happens very quickly is Amazon has to have the strictest of rules when it comes to how fast your order goes out, when a customer sends you an email request or any kind of questions, you have like 24 hours to answer that. If you don't, you get penalized and it ripples down the road. So when now I have a whole new respect when I see sellers with a 5 rating, which is the highest you can get. They're working at it every day. Ours is always hovering like 4.9 and 5.0, and we spend a lot of effort making sure it stays there because I think not only does it give customers a sense of security that it's actually things are going to work when they order it, but it also Amazon has these buy boxes where they won't promote you if you're not you won't make the buy box if you don't have this score, and so they kind of keep you on your A game for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you also mentioned that you redo your website every single year from scratch, which is amazing and crazy. It seems at the same time bring on such a big project once a year. So what's that like? How do you just not start another store, but like build your website from scratch every year?
So I feel with this space, everything needs to be fresh all the time. And if someone visited our store last year and came back a year later and it was still the same, it's not that it would discourage them. I just feel that if it was updated, it would kind of give them a sense of look, this thing is actually moving. It's something real. So one thing we haven't talked about and I can touch base on is I run a very lean ship. I run this out of my kitchen. I have myself and I have 2 contractors that help me. And that's it. We run a lean ship. When it comes to website development, I farm that out to a contractor out in the West Coast. When it comes to ad design or branding, I farm that out to an artist in Colorado. I'm a big believer in farming out the skills that you're not amazing at. Even if you're pretty good, odds are you can farm it out at a better cost and get better results.
And so how do you know what you should keep in house?
I used to work, so kind of a bit of a backstory here. In all my other entrepreneur ventures, I worked a lot. 60 to 80 hours a week was a normal week. And when I launched this business, I realized that there was a better way, and that's if you're working, once the business is set up, and I spend a lot of time and money on automation. I would rather have a business that turns, X amount of profit, but that also gives me, a work week of 20 hours versus, that incremental increase in profit, but having to work, 40, 50 hours. So we've actually turned down a lot of opportunities that, would have made things complicated. We've been approached by companies who repped Walmart, and we turned it down just because the headaches and the margins, the whole thing seemed like a horrible deal, even though, if you sell 1 million, you'll do pretty great, but it just didn't seem worth the headache. So I would rather run a tight ship. Maybe the business is a little smaller, profit margins are a little higher, and a lot less headaches, and I sleep better at night.
That's awesome. And this is just based on your experience from having to work those 60, 70-hour weeks.
There's no point. I feel like as I'm 41 now, and I'm like, what's the point of working all those hours? Best years of your life. So now I'm more into. I have a great routine. I meet with my contractors a few times a week, and they have their own responsibilities. They just fill me in on those, and it allows me to focus on other products. And I plan on launching many more businesses just like this one.
Awesome. So what is your day-to-day like then if you try to turn down anything that gives you too much of a headache and then outsource or farm out a lot of the tasks that you don't feel like is your core competency? Like, what do you spend your days doing?
So my work day consists, I start at about 11 a.m. And I finish around 2:30. So I keep it short. And then a few times a week I will touch base with Asia, which is 12-hour difference. So that's, that usually happens 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then what it does, it just frees up my time to come up with new ideas, and it's worked. We've been working on 2 other types of businesses outside of the bottle cutting space, and I plan on doing a new Kickstarter hopefully in August once all the prototyping is done.
Yeah, you're probably, of all the entrepreneurs I've spoken to, over 100 entrepreneurs, you're probably the one that's closest to that 4-hour work week dream that everyone talks about.
I tried it. It's a great book. I've tried it. I think 4 hours is just not enough for me. No. What I need to do.
4 hours a day sounds like works for you.
The thing is, I love being an entrepreneur. I love this space, so I don't mind spending 20 hours. Some weeks I do spend more, but I actually enjoy it. So if I only had 4 hours to spend in it, I'd probably miss it.
No, yeah, definitely. I think the reason why a lot of entrepreneurs get into this space is because they do like, building something and working on something and working long term on something, whether it be a business or a project. And it's kind of a gift and a curse that way. It's a battle that you have to go on inside your head. Do I want to keep on working, or do I want to, try to create more of a lifestyle for myself?
Yeah, you got to love this space. I feel like so many people think, oh, I'm going to get into this and, it's going to make all this money and I won't have to do anything. And while that might happen sometimes, that's definitely not the norm.
Makes sense.
You end up working a lot.
Yeah. So, I think listeners out there might be thinking about how they want to either start a business like yours or create a lifestyle business like yours. Maybe they already have a business and want to get to this stage. How do you get started with, reaching this stage where you are able to outsource and, automate things? Like, where do you even begin? Like, what do you look at in your business to determine what you can trim out?
So I think... So I do a lot of mentoring in this space, and I get this question asked almost every time I mentor someone. And I think the thing I tell everybody is, while you might think you need to sell 1 million units of something, to earn out a living, the truth is you don't. Selling, 10,000 of something might completely change your life, especially when you're manufacturing in Asia and you're selling direct. You might be in a position where you have a 400 to 500% margin. So you might only need to sell 5 a day, to support your lifestyle. And, come Christmas when you sell, 200 a day, that funds the rest of your year. So I would say some people think they need to come up with the next iPhone because that's the only way to make it. I think you come up with a small product. I really believe that whatever product or space you're going to get into, it needs to be a passion. because in the beginning you are going to spend a lot of time in this space, and if it's a space you don't even like, I must have mentored well over 100 people now, and only maybe 20, maybe even 15% of them actually get to the Kickstarter stage. A lot of them just lose interest in it. Wow, there's lots of energy in the beginning to get something going. They lose interest. It kind of gets boring, and it feels like work, and they don't like it. But if it's something you're passionate about, if it's a space you love, then you don't mind spending, that needed time in the beginning. So I think that's probably the most important thing is whatever space you're getting into, make sure you're passionate about it.
Yeah, this is a really important point about the passion things. I think, a lot of us or a lot of entrepreneurs hear this, not necessarily phrase, but they hear that they need to be passionate about it. But what if how do you know if you're actually passionate about something or you're just interested in it? And is there a difference in your eyes?
So there's probably a difference. I'm sure there is. It might be hard to figure out where it lies. But one of the things I tell people when I mentor them is, look, if you're serious about this project, you need to touch it every day. 7 days a week, you need to move. I always give the analogy of, pushing this boulder up a hill. If you're not at least holding that boulder back or pushing it up an inch, and you do that for a couple of days where you haven't touched your product or thought about it, I think it's already rolling back on you. And it's such an uphill battle in the beginning. And it's not that it's hard work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of like late nights, and you might be tired. And I think that's where the difference becomes, and do you like it or is it a passion? When you're tired and it's sunny outside and you just go to hang out with your friends, but you stay inside and you work in the garage, I think that's when you can tell it's a passion.
Mm-hmm. So were you passionate about, bottle cutting, or is it you're passionate about launching businesses? Like what was your passion?
Yeah, so I never really, it wasn't about bottle cutting. I'm passionate about business, just entrepreneurship and the whole process. So that kind of drives me.
I see. So you don't necessarily have to be, I guess you should be at least interested in the products you're selling, but if you're just passionate about building a business in general, would you consider that enough fuel to enough of a reason to get started?
Yeah, I feel definitely, but I don't know if you really know that unless you've been through the trenches with the business before. You might think you're passionate about a business, but if you've never done it, I don't know if you really are.
Right. So I guess you just have to kind of get started and see.
You get started, and you'll find out quick if it just kind of disappears from your top of mind awareness. All of a sudden, you haven't thought about this idea in a month. Well, odds are it's probably going nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So share whatever you feel comfortable with. How successful is the business today? You launched this 3 years ago, raised a ton of money, and then pre-sales and everything. How successful is the business today?
So last year we did over 3 million in sales, and this year we're trending towards 4 to 5 million.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff. So, I think outsourcing was a big thing for you to get into this more of a sustainable business at least for your lifestyle. Do you also depend on any tools or applications to help run the business?
So, mailing lists through MailChimp, I think is a necessity. While I don't think there's anything that works as well as sending an email to someone, and you don't want to spam your customers, but keeping them, making sure you're always in their top of mind. We might send out 4 or 5 emails a month, and it doesn't. I think that's probably a good number depending on your space. Mm-hmm. I know, like Victoria's Secret, they send out emails every day, but people don't seem to mind, so they can do that. So it all depends on your space, I think. In the Shopify platform, there's a couple apps that we use that work really well. One is there's a product upsell app that it kind of blows my mind. We put this on a few years ago, and it's just one of these apps that as you're checking out, it says, "Hey, how about adding this to your cart?" And since we've added that, 14% of everybody who's ever gone through our system has purchased that item.
Wow.
And that's accounted, I think it was over, I think to date that app has generated $250,000 in sales.
That's
and it's
amazing.
kind of odd. Yeah, I never thought, that it really worked, but obviously it does. So that, I think anyone who doesn't have that, that's definitely, that's a low-hanging fruit they can throw on there. Abandoned carts, is something that everybody talks about. I don't know what the industry average is, but ours is fairly low. Like, I think in a month I think I went back and looked. Last month we had 300 abandoned carts, and we were able to recover 104 of them.
Wow.
So I feel like it's either because we're sending the right type of traffic to our site, or there's something on our site that is keeping someone interested enough. So if they actually make it to the cart, there's a good chance, they're serious about purchasing. Those are probably the biggest things.
Cool. So you mentioned a couple of times about your mentoring program. Tell us a little more about it. Like, what is it? Who is it? I guess what kind of business or what kind of people would it make the most sense for?
So, I'm a big believer in karma, and when this thing happened to me, this whole bottle cutting thing has literally changed my life, and so not just financially, but in so many ways. So I'm a big believer in giving back, and one of the things I feel like the best place I can give back is through helping people through their own journey like this. I actually did a TED Talk about this. There's a TEDx. If you just Google my name and TEDx, you'll see it'll come up. It's called The 20 Days That Changed My Life. And in that talk, I talk about mentoring. And basically, I'll mentor anybody I can't mentor everybody, but on our bottle cutting site, under the More link, there's a place that says entrepreneurial mentoring. And if anybody wants, to touch base, I usually Skype with them, spend an hour with them. I try to schedule at least 1 or 2 a week. And I've met people from all over the world. Some people have done nothing, and other people have gone on to. I have a friend who used to work at Best Buy, and he's become a close friend now, and he's got $1 million business now.
Wow.
So, this stuff does happen.
Awesome. So what other plans do you have for the remainder of this year? Like, what are some goals that you want to hit with bottle cutting?
So we've already launched, like I said, we try to launch a couple products every year. We've already launched our candle kits, which we just launched a few months ago. And in August, September, we're launching something called Kinkajou Projects, which is just a whole set of different types of products that just are add-ons to the whole bottle cutting space. And come August or come July is when we normally start looking at our website redesign. So we start typically beginning of July, and we'll have it up and running by mid-September. So come July, we'll look at a whole new rebranding and get that going.
Very cool. So thanks so much, Pat. So bottlecutting.com, bottlecutting.com is a website. Anywhere else you recommend that listeners check out? They want to stay in touch with you or follow with what you're up to?
So if you, we have a blog on bottlecutting.com. I feel like it's probably the best place where we post everything that's up and coming. And if you join the newsletter that's on bottlecutting.com, you'll definitely stay in the know. We plan on launching a whole new product in August, which is in a whole other space. So we'll be announcing that shortly. And if you're on that list, you'll be notified.
Very cool. Thanks so much, Pat.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com for a free 14-day trial.